It's a South African country. We've got to raise $11 billion. $11 billion?
He's worth over $11 billion.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. I'm honored to be here today. I stand before you not as an expert, but as a concerned citizen, one of the 400,000 people who marched in the streets of New York on Sunday, and the billions of others around the world who want to solve our climate crisis. As an actor, I pretend for a living. I play fictitious characters, often solving fictitious problems. I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same way, as if it were a fiction, as if pretending that climate change wasn't real would somehow make it go away. But I think we all know better than that now. Every week we're seeing new and undeniable climate events, evidence that accelerated climate change is here right now. Droughts are intensifying, our oceans are acidifying, with methane plumes rising up from the ocean floor. We are seeing extreme weather events and the West Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets melting at unprecedented rates, decades ahead of scientific projections. None of this is rhetoric, and none of it is hysteria. It is fact. The scientific community knows it, industry knows it, governments know it, even the United States military knows it. The chief of the U.S. Navy's Pacific Command, Admiral Samuel Locklear, recently said that climate change is our single greatest security threat. My friends, this body, perhaps more than any other gathering in human history, now faces this difficult but achievable task. You can make history, or you will be vilified by it. To be clear, this is not about just telling people to change their light bulbs or to buy a hybrid car. This disaster has grown beyond the choices that individuals make. This is now about our industries and our governments around the world taking decisive, large-scale action. Now must be our moment for action. We need to put a price tag on carbon emissions and eliminate government subsidies for oil, coal, and gas companies. We need to end the free ride that industrial polluters have been given in the name of a free market economy. They do not deserve our tax dollars. They deserve our scrutiny, for the economy itself will die if our ecosystems collapse. The good news is that renewable energy is not only achievable, but good economic policy. This is not a partisan debate, it is a human one. Clean air and a livable climate are inalienable human rights. And solving this crisis is not a question of politics, it is a question of our own survival. This is the most urgent of times and the most urgent of messages. Honored delegates, leaders of the world, I pretend for a living, but you do not. The people made their voices heard on Sunday around the world, and the momentum will not stop. But now it is your turn. The time to answer humankind's greatest challenge is now. We beg of you to face it with courage and honesty. Thank you.
Before I ask you, how do you plan to do that? Crowdfunding.
We must not forget the founders of our country.
And we'll invite the Russians. Let the Russians in, Siegfried.
Yes. Commissar Malyanov, I understand this is your and the General's first visit to the United States.
Da. We have come here with an open mind.
An open mind?
Da. We have come here to see with our own eyes the starvation, the exploitation of the working class by a rotten capitalistic system.
But Commissar...
You are a decaying imperialistic society. My country is the future. we will annihilate you, we will smash you, we will destroy you, we will demolish you, we will tear you up into little pieces and stamp on you.
Commissar, what is the purpose of your visit?
Peace.
Shut the rubbish, you're a trinky poinky. Trinky point, you drink me all the time. What your friends say, are you a trinky poinky? Trinky poinky, drink me all the time. Hey!
That third failure in a row, did you think, I need to pack this in?
Never.
Why not?
I don't ever give up. I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated.
Really liking what you do, whatever area that you get into, given that even if you're the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. If you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. I mean, it's something that your mind is drawn to, and if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think.
So many people tried to talk me out of starting a rocket company. It was crazy. One good friend of mine collected a whole series of videos of rockets blowing up and made me watch those. He just didn't want me to lose all my money. We're doing these things that seem unlikely to succeed, and we've been fortunate, and at least thus far they have succeeded.
That is why I say our way is the future. But I am not here to waste my words on the deaf ears of the corrupt capitalistic powers. I'm here to appeal to the neutral nations, Poland, Cuba, Romania, Red China. It is to you, the free and liberated nations, that I speak. You may applaud now. As for you, warmongering, imperialistic, capitalistic nations, I say again, stay out of Berlin, stay out of Europe, stay out of Asia, stay out of the world.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, fellow leaders, for all the immediate challenges that we gather to address this week, terrorism, instability, inequality, disease, there's one issue that will define the contours of this century more dramatically than any other, and that is the urgent and growing threat of a changing climate. 5 years have passed since many of us met in Copenhagen. And since then, our understanding of climate change has advanced, both in the deepening science that says this once distant threat has moved firmly into the present, and into the sting of more frequent extreme weather events that show us exactly what these changes may mean for future generations. No nation is immune. In America, the past decade has been our hottest on record. Along our eastern coast, the city of Miami now floods at high tide. In our west, wildfire season now stretches most of the year. In our heartland, farms have been parched by the worst drought in generations and drenched by the wettest spring in our history. A hurricane left parts of this great city dark and underwater, and some nations already live with far worse. Worldwide, this summer was the hottest ever recorded, with global carbon emissions still on the rise. So the climate is changing faster than our efforts to address it. The alarm bells keep ringing. Our citizens keep marching. We cannot pretend we do not hear them. We have to answer the call. We know what we have to do to avoid irreparable harm. We have to cut carbon pollution in our own countries to prevent the worst effects of climate change. We have to adapt to the impacts that, unfortunately, we can no longer avoid. And we have to work together as a global community to tackle this global threat before it is too late. We cannot condemn our children and their children to a future that is beyond their capacity to repair. Not when we have the means, the technological innovation, and the scientific imagination to begin the work of repairing it right now. As one of America's governors has said, we are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change and the last generation that can do something about it. So today I am here personally as the leader of the world's largest economy and its second largest emitter to say that we have begun to do something about it. The United States has made ambitious investments in clean energy and ambitious reductions in our carbon emissions. We now harness 3 times as much electricity from the wind and 10 times as much from the sun as we did when I came into office. Within a decade, our cars will go twice as far on a gallon of gas, and already every major automaker offers electric vehicles. We've made unprecedented investments to cut energy waste in our homes and our buildings and our appliances, all of which will save consumers billions of dollars, and we are committed to helping communities build climate-resilient infrastructure. So all told, these advances have helped create jobs, grow our economy, and drive our carbon pollution to its lowest levels in nearly 2 decades, proving that there does not have to be a conflict between a sound environment and strong economic growth. Over the past 8 years, the United States has reduced our total carbon pollution by more than any other nation on earth. But we have to do more. Last year, I issued America's first climate action plan to double down on our efforts. Under that plan, my administration is working with states and utilities to set first-ever standards to cut the amount of carbon pollution our power plants can dump into the air. And when completed, this will mark the single most important and significant step the United States has ever taken to reduce our carbon emissions. Last week alone, we announced an array of new actions in renewable energy and energy efficiency that will save consumers more than $10 billion on their energy bills and cut carbon pollution by nearly 300 million metric tons through 2030. That's the equivalent of taking more than 60 million cars off the road for 1 year. I also convened a group of private sector leaders who have agreed to do their part to slash consumption of dangerous greenhouse gases known as HFCs, slash them 80% by 2050. And already more than 100 nations have agreed to launch talks to phase down HFCs under the Montreal Protocol. The same agreement the world used successfully to phase out ozone-depleting chemicals. And this is something that President Xi of China and I have worked on together. Just a few minutes ago, I met with Chinese Vice Premier Zhang Guoli and reiterated my belief that as the 2 largest economies and emitters in the world, we have a special responsibility to lead. That's what big nations have to do. And today I call on all countries to join us. Not next year or the year after that, but right now. Because no nation can meet this global threat alone. The United States has engaged more allies and partners to cut carbon pollution and prepare for the impacts we cannot avoid. All told, American climate assistance now reaches more than 120 nations around the world. We're helping more nations skip past the dirty phase of development using current technologies, not duplicating the same mistakes and environmental degradation that took place previously. We're partnering with African entrepreneurs to launch clean energy projects. We're helping farmers practice climate-smart agriculture and plant more durable crops. We're building international coalitions to drive action from reducing methane emissions from pipelines to launching a free trade agreement for environmental goods. And we have been working shoulder to shoulder with many of you to make the Green Climate Fund a reality. But let me be honest, none of this is without controversy. In each of our countries, there are interests that will be resistant to action. And in each country, there is a suspicion that if we act and other countries don't, that we will be at an economic disadvantage. But we have to lead. That is what the United Nations and this General Assembly is about. Now, the truth is that no matter what we do, some populations will still be at risk. The nations that contribute the least to climate change often stand to lose the most. And that's why, since I took office, the United States has expanded our direct adaptation assistance eightfold. And we're going to do more. Today, I'm directing our federal agencies to begin factoring climate resilience into our international development programs and investments. And I'm announcing a new effort to deploy the unique scientific and technological capabilities of the United States, from climate data to early warning systems. So this effort includes a new partnership that will draw on the resources and expertise of our leading private sector companies and philanthropies to help vulnerable nations better prepare for weather-related disasters and better plan for long-term threats like steadily rising seas. Yes, this is hard, but there should be no question that the United States of America is stepping up to the plate. We recognize our role in creating this problem. We embrace our responsibility to combat it. We will do our part, and we will help developing nations do theirs. But we can only succeed in combating climate change if we are joined in this effort by every nation, developed and developing alike. Nobody gets a pass. The emerging economies that have experienced some of the most dynamic growth in recent years have also emitted rising levels of carbon pollution. It is those emerging economies that are likely to produce more and more carbon emissions in the years to come. So nobody can stand on the sidelines on this issue. We have to set aside the old divides. We have to raise our collective ambition, each of us doing what we can to confront this global challenge. This time we need an agreement that reflects economic realities in the next decade and beyond. It must be ambitious, because that's what the scale of this challenge demands. It must be inclusive, because every country must play its part. And yes, it must be flexible, because different nations have different circumstances. 5 years ago, I pledged America would reduce our carbon emissions in the range of 17% below 2005 levels by the year 2020. America will meet that target. And by early next year, we will put forward our next emission target, reflecting our confidence in the ability of our technological entrepreneurs and scientific innovators to lead the way. So today I call on all major economies to do the same. For I believe, in the words of Dr. King, that there is such a thing as being too late. And for the sake of future generations, our generation must move toward a global compact to confront a changing climate while we still can. This challenge demands our ambition. Our children deserve such ambition. And if we act now, if we can look beyond the swarm of current events and some of the economic challenges and political challenges involved, if we place the air that our children will breathe and the food that they will eat and the hopes and dreams of all posterity above our own short-term interests, we may not be too late for them. While you and I may not live to see all the fruits of our labor, we can act to see that the century ahead is marked not by conflict but by cooperation, not by human suffering but by human progress, and that the world we leave to our children and our children's children will be cleaner and healthier and more prosperous and secure. Thank you very much.
Da. Chief of Protocol Domsky. Just a moment. It is the State Department. They have arranged a sightseeing tour for you.
Not interested.
But, comrade, you said you wanted to see...
Not interested. They'll only show me the things they want me to see, just as we only show them the things we want them to see.
Da. Comrade Malyanov is not interested.
I want to see the true United States of America that they are hiding from me. The starvation, the exploitation of the working class, the decaying capitalist system on its last legs.
Da.
I want to see those starving mine workers.
Comrade.
Ground down by poverty.
Comrade.
What is it?
The mine workers just signed a new contract. They are getting a minimum without overtime of $110 a week.
What is that in rubles?
450.
150 rubles a week? Forget the mine workers. I want to see the downtrodden steel workers sweating away in front of an open blast furnace.
The steel workers just got a new contract too.
How much do they get? So much? Just for sweating a little? I came here to see poverty. I came here to see the working class oppressed by their capitalistic bosses. Find me the most underpaid, the most downtrodden, the most exploited workers in the country.
I have it right here.
Who are they?
The New York City Police Department.
These are the people I want to talk to. These are the people I want to live with. Here with my own eyes, I will see the true oppressed working class of America.
There's a holdup in the Bronx, Brooklyn's broken out in fights. There's a traffic jam in Harlem that's backed up to Jackson Heights. There's a scout troop short a child, Khrushchev's doing idle wild. Car 54, where are you?
Tonight's program brought to you by Thrill, Procter & Gamble's new dishwashing liquid. And by Prel Concentrate, the shampoo in the handy unbreakable tube.
Can you hear that? Canada Goose. Oh, and the guys over here behind me. Let's see if I can get their attention. Okay, this is an official Canada Goose honk. All right? Honk! Honk!
Oh, boy.
Of Texas. My friends, I want to thank you for that sincere and heartwarming ovation. No questions, please.
Governor, what do you think of the crisis in the Middle East?
I was saying just this morning at the weekly prayer breakfast in this historic capital that it behooves both the Jews and the Arabs to settle their differences in a Christian manner. Governor, we got a question.
We know a remote farm in Lincolnshire where Mrs. Buckley lives. Every July, peas grow there. Do you really mean that?
Yeah, so in other words, I'd start half a second late.
Don't you think you really want to say July over the snow? Isn't that the fun of it?
If you can make it almost when that shot disappears, it'll make my...
I think it's so nice that you see a snow-covered field and say every July peas grow there. We know a remote farm in Lincolnshire where Mrs. Buckley lives. Every July, peas grow there. We aren't even in the fields, you see.
Yeah, we aren't.
We're talking about them growing, and she's picked them.
Yeah.
What?
In July.
I don't understand you, then. What must be over for July?
When we get out of that snowy field.
When I was out, we were onto a can of peas, a big dish of peas when I said in July.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, always.
In July.
I'm always past that.
You are.
Yes. Well, that's about where I say in July.
Can you emphasize a bit in July?
Why? That doesn't make any sense. Sorry. There's no known way of saying an English sentence in which you begin a sentence with in and emphasize it. Get me a jury and show me how you can say in July, and I'll go down on you. That's just idiotic, if you'll forgive me by saying so. That's just stupid. In July. I'd love to know how you emphasize in July. Impossible. Meaningless.
I think all they were thinking about was that they didn't want to...
He isn't thinking.
Wilson, can we just do one last...
Yeah?
And it was my fault. I said in July. If you can leave every July...
You didn't say it. He said it.
Every July.
Your friend. Every July?
So after the show...
No, you don't really mean every July.
It is.
But that's bad copy. It's in July. Of course it's every July. Too much directing around here. Norway. Fish fingers, no, Findus, Norway. We know a certain fjord in Norway, near where the cod gather in great shoals. There, Jan Stangeland. Shit.
A fraction more on that shoals thing, because you rolled it around very nicely.
Yeah, roll it around, and I have no more time. You don't know what I'm up against. Because it's full of things that are only correct because they're grammatical, but they're tough on the ear. You see, this is a very wearying one. It's unpleasant to read. Unrewarding. Because Findus freeze the cod at sea and then add a crumb crisp coating. That's tough, crumb crisp coating. I think, no, because of the way it's written, you need to break it up because it's not as conversationally written. What?
Take crumb out.
Take crumb out. Good. Here under protest is beef burgers. We know a little place in the American far west where Charlie Briggs chops up the finest prairie-fed beef and tastes... This is a lot of shit, you know that. You want one more?
Yeah.
More on what, beef?
You missed the first beef, actually, completely.
What do you mean missed it?
You're emphasizing prairie-fed.
But you can't emphasize beef. That's like his wanting me to emphasize in before July. Come on, fellas, you're losing your heads. I wouldn't direct any living actor like this in Shakespeare. Will you do this? It's impossible.
Orson, you did 6 last year, and by far and away the best, and I know the reason.
The right reading for this is the one I'm giving it.
At the moment.
I spent 20 times more for you people than any other commercial I've ever made. You are such pests. Now, what is it you want?
No, I think...
In your depths of your ignorance, what is it you want? Whatever it is you want, I can't deliver because I just don't see it.
That was absolutely fine. It really was.
It isn't worth it. No money is worth it.
Fella Jackson.
Same as usual, not a damn thing. that.
I hear him talking, but he don't come in.
Ooh, I love to dance a little side step. Now they see me, now they don't have come and gone. And ooh, I love to sweep around the white step. Cut a little swat, then lead the people on.
There he is. Come on, boys. Governor, Governor, Melbourne people, watch talk news.
We seem to be having some acoustic problems in here.
Aren't you afraid of possible payoffs and bribes?
Melvin, I'm sorry.
Enough of this pussyfooting, Governor.
Ooh, I love to dance a little side step. Now they see me, now they don't have come and gone. And ooh, I love to sweep around the white step. Cut a little swat, then lead the people on. Ooh, I love to dance a little side step. Ooh, I love to sweep around the white step. Cut a little swat, then lead the people on.
Storm clouds may appear, but the ship's coming in. Oh, tempests though they rage, but the ship's coming in. The Savior is in control, though the tide and the billows roll. But the old civil Zion coming in, raging floods around us meet, but the ship's coming in. In Christ there is safe retreat, for the ship's coming in. Will your anchor hold as the elements beat upon your soul? For the old civil Zion coming in.
Now is the time to take risk. You don't have kids. As you get older, your obligations increase. So and once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it.
How did you figure you were going to start a car company and be successful at it?
Well, I didn't really think Tesla would be successful. I thought we would most likely fail. But I thought that we at least could address the false perception that people had that an electric car had to be ugly and slow and boring like a golf cart.
But you say you didn't expect the company to be successful, then why try?
If something's important enough, you should try, even if the probable outcome is failure.
You focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. For example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. I think that's the way to go. For any given company, just keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts.
When I interview someone to work at the companies, would be to ask them to tell me about the problems that they worked on and how they solved them. And if someone was really the person that solved it, they'll be able to answer multiple levels. They'll be able to go down to the brass tacks. And if they weren't, they'll get stuck.
And then you can say, oh, this person was not really the person who solved it, because anyone who struggled hard with a problem never forgets it. If you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing, that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company. You've got to make sure that whatever you're doing is a great product or service. It has to be really great. And I go back to what I was saying earlier, where if you're a new company, I mean, unless it's like some new industry or new market that, if it's an untapped market, then you have more ability to, the standard is lower for your product or service. But if you're entering anything where there's an existing marketplace against large entrenched competitors, then your product or service needs to be much better than theirs. It can't be a little bit better, because then you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer, and they say, why would you buy it as a consumer? You're always going to buy the trusted brand unless there's a big difference. So a lot of times, an entrepreneur will come up with something which is only slightly better. And it can't just be slightly better. It's got to be a lot better. Depending upon how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hard up we had one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night. 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, like, I mean, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say, particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, you say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company.
Honk, honk. Doesn't that sound like something out of the Flintstones?
Oh, boy.
Can you see them? They're right there.
Honk, honk, honk. Honk.
But Fred!
But Fred! Where's your man?
But Fred!
But Fred!
But Fred!
But Fred!